Thank you so much for the introduction. Before I begin, let me sort of issue an apology. I neglected to supply online compliance panel with my current bio. Since I've been in the industry, I've also overseen notified body and FDA inspections. So I don't want any of you attendees to think that it's something that I forewent when I took the current position at Medivata. So just as an FYI. When it comes to webinars, the thing I find interesting is that there's really only one detriment, that quite honestly, I can't see you and you can't see me. The way I like to address that is during the Q&A session at the end, I'm more than willing to make that a discussion as much as you all would like. More so as a Q&A, if there's a particular situation you expect you may encounter or you have encountered with regard to preparation, performance, or follow-up to an FDA inspection, let's more than happy to talk about it with you. I'm going to begin the webinar with covering the authority to inspect. I mean, what makes the FDA think that they can come to my facility? There are different types of inspections. I'll go into that next. Then sort of the circle, if you will, the whole cycle of FDA inspections, which is the pre-inspection preparation, getting ready for the inspection itself, the closeout meeting, which occurs right at the end of the inspection, and then post-inspection activities, follow-up to any citations or any verbal observations. And that pretty much continues up into pre-inspection preparation, since you should always be improving your systems or preparing for the next inspection. That's kind of a single source, a single practice right there. And then hopefully you'll agree, tie it together nice in a little summary. Before getting into the inspection itself, it's really important to understand FDA's right, if you will, to inspect your firm. I mean, can the agency show up at any time, day or night? What if you don't feel like letting the inspector in? The FD&C Act, Section 704, states that the FDA can enter and inspect at reasonable times. Looking at this, the bottom line is that this isn't really an issue to be too concerned about. As often as many people grouch about the FDA trying to take advantage of them, it's important to realize that FDA is a business, just like your business. They want to utilize their assets and personnel to get maximum value. When they send an inspector to a firm at 7 a.m. or at 5 p.m., they're just asking for a failed attempt at beginning an inspection, which is designed to get an accurate picture of a firm's compliance. The agency can also enter and inspect within reasonable times and in a reasonable manner. Well, it's important to note that reasonable is unfortunately not defined. Having said this, that the statute doesn't define reasonable, their establishment inspection procedures maintain that their authority extends to what is reasonably necessary. Here comes sort of something to consider, to achieve the objective of the inspection. What is the objective of the inspection? To get an accurate compliance status of your firm. So all reasonable deals with is they want to be able to utilize their resources to get an accurate compliance picture of what you're up to. When it comes to refusal to allow, you cannot say to an FDA inspector, "Oh, no, I'm not letting you come in." Well, physically you certainly can say it, but it's a violation of law to say it. Because anytime you list with the FDA and you fill out your establishment registration, you pay your several $1,000s per year, you are de facto allowing the agency access to your facilities and your records. And what's going to happen is if you say to the inspector, sorry, you can't come in for whatever reason, the inspector is not going to try to physically force their way in. They're not going to try to argue with you. They're just going to turn around and they're going to leave. Now, of course, none of you would think this, but I certainly would want to explicitly warn you against thinking that you've achieved a victory over the government, because you haven't. What's going to happen within the next 24 hours max is that the inspector is going to return, maybe even with the federal magistrate, and a search warrant. Something I'll comment on now, but speak to later in the presentation, is that a lot of the FDA inspection is almost mental in nature. It's showing the FDA that you have nothing to hide. It's getting off on a good non-confrontational foot, if you will. When you begin your inspection by responding with a negative situation like this, it doesn't set a good course for this FDA inspection. Now, as distinguished from an absolute refusal to allow an inspection, you might want to consider a recommendation or a request to reschedule. There may very well be instances in which your primary and even secondary FDA liaisons are absent, especially if you're maybe a small to a medium-sized company. As opposed to refusing the inspector access, well, we can't let you in because there's nobody here to show your compliance system, you can certainly recommend to reschedule. You've got to account for this in your procedure. I recommend you put, if you want to take this course, you have provisions in place in your procedure and include specifics. Who is the primary liaison by name? Who is the secondary liaison? And you want to show the inspector this procedure. Your goal here is to convince them that a rescheduling makes sense and that you have practices in place, contingency plans in place to address this. When you offer this reschedule, you want to make sure that you have an exact date of rescheduling and that date is imminent. Make sure that you know or find out when the absent liaison is going to return and offer to schedule an inspection immediately upon their return. Don't try to convince the inspector, well, Mr. Kassoff will have been out a week. He's going to have a lot of emails to catch up on. We have our daily management meeting, operations meeting. So I don't know, maybe several days after that. Absolutely that next day. After your attempts to try to appeal to the inspector, though, be fully prepared to have the inspector turn down your very kind offer. Then what you want to do is have a member of management lead the inspection. Please make sure that this member of management has at least a reasonable knowledge of FDA inspections and your quality system. A production manager, maybe R&D director or manager, those are some good ideas. A CFO, that's a bad idea. And also, you want to make sure that that person requests that they begin with an available area. Let's say if you have your R&D manager lead the inspection, your R&D manager has more than a passing familiarity with design control. So requesting that the FDA inspector deviate from the standard practice, which begins with management controls in the quality systems inspection technique, we'll cover that in a little while. There's nothing wrong with having your R&D manager say to the inspector, well, I'm over this area. I know it well. I can provide you with an accurate snapshot, an accurate picture of our compliance status. In my experience, I've not heard of an inspector refusing that and demanding that they begin with an area in which the liaison is not familiar. And last, just as more of an FYI than anything else, if your company is located outside the U.S., but you sell into the U.S., then your firm is subject to inspection. Remember, it's not your location, but the location of your customers. Having said that, though, I can assure you that the frequency of inspection for international firms is far less often than for domestic firms, and that the overwhelming majority of foreign firms will be contacted in advance. They will receive the pre-announced inspection to schedule an inspection and make sure that they're available on that particular day. There are tens of thousands of companies currently regulated by FDA, but there are only 24